Hey there, how are you? Okay. Why are you bringing in furnace filters? But I said, I thought you were bringing in furnace filters. You got no furnace filters. But it wasn't. Okay, first things first, anybody have any questions about the video that you're watching for the transcription project? Everybody been out to look at it? Don't understand who the consultant is. There, I think in a couple semesters ago, I wrote, make sure you transcribe the consultant, and the person who did that read consultant as the person who was an English speaker asking the questions. Well, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to transcribe the speech of the guy who's being interviewed. I think he's from the Dominican Republic, if I remember correctly. So make sure that when you're doing it, you're looking at the English language learner's speech. You don't have to put in anything for the speaker who is asking the questions, given that her English is superb, probably better than mine. No sense in writing that down and trying to transcribe it. So I'm really only interested in 60 seconds of the English language learner. Okay? And don't be surprised if you have to listen to it many times, because I have to listen to it many times, and I've done this a bunch of times. So you'll have to hear it over and over again to really get a feel for what it is that he's saying, to get that spelling transcription out, the regular spelling generally, and then also as you take that regular spelling and you start to transcribe it into IPA. Everybody comfortable using IPAtypeit.org? Anybody uncomfortable with that? Because you'll need to do that as you put this thing together. The other thing is you do only have to transcribe, I think I said 60 seconds or 1 minute. When you get to the next part though, after you go through the transcription, you're probably going to have to listen to the whole thing, because you're out there looking for errors. And as you're looking for those errors, or those, what I should call deviations from what you would expect a native speaker to say, it'll probably require you to listen to the whole, I don't know, it's probably 15 minutes long or something like that. So you'll have to probably listen to that whole thing in several times as well. Maybe not so many for finding the errors as you do for the transcription, but don't try to do it on 1 or 2 listenings. It's probably not going to work out well. Okay? Any questions? Anybody who doesn't know how to get in touch with me if you have questions later? Great. Okay. I want to check homework today. So if you would take out the homework, which I believe is only the supplemental exercises 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 11. Today's date is 2/24. If I don't give you a number different than, or some kind of a number, just use a 1. And today's date and your name. Were you? You're probably the only one. Oh, man. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Dexterity. I'll come back because probably should have done 2 rows at once. That's what I'll do this time. Got it? Got it? Everybody? Right. I got one like that too. And when you get done, if you pass them over that way, that'll be great. Get that way from all of them. So for the introduction, when you're writing up that little introductory paragraph, it doesn't have to be long. It's probably a short paragraph. You give me a pseudonym for the guy instead of his real name. Tell me he comes from the Dominican Republic, how old you think he is, what language you think he speaks, etc. What language does he speak? Spanish. Did that whole row come over? Okay. All right, let's go over these because we're kind of wrapping up today on phonology and phonetics, and then we're going to be moving into morphology even today before we leave here. So I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to see these and that you have an opportunity to go through them, see the errors that you're making, and then make some corrections for yourself. Okay? On a couple of these, I'm not going to go through every single answer, but let's look at number 1. And could somebody read me the letters that they chose going down to the place where you had to fill in the letters so that you could match the sound over to the words? So we want to do it? I'm going to start in the middle and then I'll just go from there. Hi. Yeah.
I didn't write the letter.
Okay. 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 Theta and A and I, right? Phi. Very good. How about the one above that? I'm sorry, the one below it. Thou.
Thou.
Yep.
Thou. I did the
B. Right.
yeah and then with the O.
Not with the O, because then what would you do with the those? Oh, well, anyway, that's okay. So that's great. That's, we end up doing that all the time because we jump in there and go, we're so used to spelling and saying, and so we do that. However, in this case, we should have B for the first one. Then we should have A. Those are the two you used. We get down to V. That should be D. When we get to they, it should be C. Actually, this is probably not the best way to do it. I'm just going to read off the letters. But here's the sequence of the letters that you should have. From top to bottom, B, A, D, C, F, E. Okay? B, A, D, C, F, E. Which ones cause you trouble? Any that you see in there that go, wow, that doesn't make sense? I'm sorry? For C and E, V and F. Okay, so V is C is V, right? So that's going to be the D that's kind of funny looking, the EV symbol, followed by the lowercase I. That is the 1, 2, 3, fourth one down. And then you said, what was the other one? F? Oh, you put D for E. So you swap those around? Okay, so if I look at the bottom where I've got though, right? That's though, that one should be E. And when you move up to the other one, we should have the. Both of those are going to have that strange looking D with a single syllable after it. Now, thaw, what was thaw? How would you spell thaw? Exactly. It's the backwards C, right? So it's theta, because if you listen to it, it's thaw, as opposed to listening to though, and you feel all of that vibration going on, which would make it the EV symbol, the D. Okay, how about number 2? Any other ones on number 1 first? So you know what I'm doing, right? I'm just reading down that list of matching letters. Does that work, everybody? Okay. Great. So for the next group, I have cars. That's C. Then I've got curse. Is that right? No, wait a minute. Yeah, terse. A little strange. I don't think that card. But in any case, that's the E. The next one down is cures, right? Cures would be B. Cares would be D, right there on the same line. Coors, silver bullet. Everybody knows the silver bullet. Coors from Golden, Colorado. That's an F, and course is A. So if I go through those one more time, it's C, E, B, D, F, A. Questions on that group? Any? Got that one pretty well down? Yeah, the horseshoe. The horseshoe is the one that's lax, so it's more like than oo. So which one are you talking about? I've got one that's coors, that is the next to the last one, so that should be F. Coors, right? Yes. And do we have any with just a regular? We had one with a U, just a regular U, but that one is cures. And notice something important on that one. Notice that we're not saying the U by itself is not U, it's oo. And so when we're looking there, we actually have a Y in there so that it is cures. Cures. Okay, got that Y part in there? And Y? Understood? Yes, ma'am. Cares, the one that's K backwards 3 RZ. Yep. It's just the closest one that it's got there would be cares. If you think about it, it's cares. when they get that R in there, it sometimes fouls things up and makes it a little hard to hear. But in there, even though it's spelled with an A, we're pronouncing it with a S sound, cares. Answer that? Okay. I don't know. I see some eyes looking at me going, I don't know. Okay, yes, ma'am.
How do you determine if it's a K or a C?
If it's a K or a C, in the IPA, you're going to be using K all the time. And you may remember I said if it's a K in spelling, you're going to use a K. If it's a C in spelling, you're going to use a K. The C symbol, there is one, but it's different. And it's really not the way you would think of cares, either the C side, the S side or the K side. So just use K. And I'm thinking I don't have any place where I'm expecting to see a C. Okay. How we doing? Other questions? Okay, so let's do one that's more interesting. Let's look at number 3. See, I started with you, so over I go. Let's see. Isabel, right? No, Isabel, right? And so, Ashley? No? Come on. You usually sit next to Kim. I don't know.
Ariana.
Oh, Ariana. I can tell you, with these masks, it's even worse. But okay, Ariana, if you could, if we're looking at number 3A here, and we're supposed to identify the error, there's something wrong in there. And so when they say mother this, and then they transcribe it this way, what was wrong?
They added a H
Why is that wrong?
because it's not pronounced.
Very good. Actually, yes, that's true. It's not pronounced because the eth takes up both the T and the H that we have in spelling, right? Ilani, how about B? What's wrong with B? That would be pronounced like spade, right? Okay, but so what should that be? How would you fix it? No, because that would just be spelling, and then we'd end up with spade. What's the sound that would be like the E in speed? What symbol do we use? Okay, the lowercase I, right? So really what we've got there is it doesn't look like the word at all because we've taken that double E, we've changed it to the lowercase I because IPA wise, and in many languages, that I is going to be the E sound. Okay, very good. Let's see. So you did so well on that one. What's wrong with the next one? You get a double.
So the E, and then the opposite E.
Upside down E.
Is that an opposite and is it capital I? Well, that's how I spell it.
Yes, that's how you would spell it. So actually, I would say receipt. Receipt, right? So the upside down E strikes me as correct because we would probably, most of us would not say, can I have a receipt? If we were just speaking naturally, it'd probably be receipt. So that's not the problem. Then there's an E there. That looks good because that's receipt, right? Receipt. We don't pronounce the P. Some people do, and when you do, you catch it right away because they'll go, oh, it's a receipt. But it's usually not going to be a native speaker of English because we somehow know to drop that P. So that's the problem there. We shouldn't have the P because it's silent. Yep. All right, great. Okay, Lupe, I think we've got the word ankle. What's wrong? That would be ankle. I probably wouldn't do that. There's another error it's one that I've talked about several times. The what? The L's okay. Okay, very good. R-pod. What do you think? What's wrong in there? You did what? Oh, the You swap it? Oh, it is ankle, but if you swap it, you'd have ankle. Okay, so did you put a K in it? An extra K? Yep. But that would be ankle. Right. I like your K. The K is important. Selma, do you know why the K is important? Exactly. So listen to it carefully how we pronounce it. And this is the same thing that I was talking about with things like finger, right? We have thing, it's the NG, and then we still have the GER. So we would have to have both the and the G. So the error here is we're missing the K, because if we take the K out, we're saying angle, right? The NG takes care of the but it doesn't take care of a following G or K. So angle would be how we would do it if we just pronounced it here. But the K, as R-pod said, is some got to be there. And then Selma says that's what's missing in the word. Okay, Gally, we've got crate. Oh, great. You changed the what? Very good. So this was your question earlier. When do we use the K? So in this case, we used the wrong letter C, and it should have started with a K. Then we've got fine. She's Christina. You're Cynthia. You guys messing it up. You guys change your name. Get out. You know, Ralph and Jerry. Anyway. Right. Because what does that say? If you actually read that IPA for F, what would it say? Not A. It'd be fine. No, that's perfect. If we pronounced what's here, it would be fine A, right? Because that E would have to get pronounced in this, whereas for most purposes, we wouldn't have that pronounced at all. Okay. All right, let's come up to the front. What's wrong with G? Yeah. Very good. So the U should be that other lax U, the one that looks kind of like a horseshoe. Very good. That's it. How about correct? Sebastian, what's wrong with correct? Why is that extra? Because there's only one. The fact that we spell it with two matters not at all when we get to IPA, right? So, huh? That's exactly right. So watch out for that extra R. The E's at the end of words, they really mess people up because we're so used to them. Now, we're back to a similar one that we had in the back. We're talking about finger. What's wrong with that one? We're missing the G, right? We don't call this a finger. We call it a finger. And so we have to have not only the ing in the thing, but we still need the g for ger, just like we needed the k for ankle. Great. Now, how about singer? Let's say somebody wanted to write the word, transcribe the word singer. How would you do it? Do you say singer? If I wanted you to just do singer, what would you put? Without the G. It'd basically be the same thing we've got here, except then it would have an S, but no G, and it'd be singer. However, If you listen to the guy on the video and he definitely says singer, if he does, I haven't listened to it all that closely, but if he said singer, would you put in there singer or singer? Singer, because what we are doing is we are transcribing exactly what he says, correct? All right. So we got one last one, sigh. That one is Jen's.
Okay.
Sigh.
And then capitalize.
Yes, it should just be S-A-I, right? Sigh. Go ahead.
Depends on like what you decide. So when we we're gonna spell out what he says.
Yes.
And then just transcribe the what he said.
That's the easy way for me to think of it, but you probably got to double check as you're going
So
along.
you would put in singer, but say put in how it said.
Yeah. So you would probably, there's no way to really write singer regularly. So you probably would just put singer there. But when you transcribed it, you'd get that extra G.
Okay.
That's the question? Super. What's wrong with the G and the H?
The G and the H, in this one, there's no H sound in there.
Okay, so the transcription has the H in there, right? But we don't say sigh. So that isn't there. It's just a silent letter. But I thought GH in the word enough is an F. Isn't it?
Yes.
So shouldn't it be that here? Good hearing of the hint. Okay, you shouldn't be doing that. We got to deal with what's actually sounded out. All right, number 4. Kendra. Number 4A. What is that word? Ant. I agree with that. Just since that was so easy, what's the next one? It's tougher, huh? Start out, just go slowly. And I got you on the spot. Aren't you an astronomer? What were you going to say?
I was stuck on 2, but then I ended up on 7.
Saturn is it. Remember we talked about that little goofy R, and that there's a lot of times where T and D become R. Oops, not R. They become the car, the alveolar flap, when they're in a certain arrangement of vowels later on. If the first vowel is, if it's in between 2 vowels, I might as well write the whole thing. In that particular case, that's why that Saturn is in there with that goofy little R, because that's how we see flapping occur. Okay, Mandy, what's the next one? I got C. What do you think C is? Think of the movie.
Jen?
Almost. No, not. Oh, yeah, you're probably good enough to remember Jan something. I didn't never see it. But there's an older movie. I heard it. Jaws. Is it not? Even though it doesn't look like it's spelled right, it's jaw. Remember, we'll talk more about that S turning to a Z when we get into morphology, but it's jaws. Ah, D. Attention. Did you get that right away or did it take a while? I didn't. Yeah, well, okay, so the T with the H that's that puff of air, tension. But if I said attentive, that second T wouldn't have the puff because it's the one that's in front of the stressed vowel. So that's why that's there. And chun, but I had to look at that. I mean, I've used this book for 5 or 6 years. I had to look at that again. Go, how much? We started with. We'll continue with you. it's your turn. What do we have? Oh, E. This one's hard. Oh, never mind. Oatmeal, right? How many of you say, I want oatmeal for breakfast? Probably nobody. It just kind of comes out oatmeal, right? Very good. Okay, so you got that one, and I would have expected that to be harder. Okay, number 5. Given the phoneme O, oh, wait a second. Identify the phoneme that would result if you make the following feature changes. Given the phoneme O, change high, minus high to plus high. What would you get? Yep, you'd get the U, right? So that would be the written U, but it would be the sound oo. That's the thing we got to remember not to forget. On B, let's see. So, let's see. Given the phoneme oo, we're going to change it to from interdental to labiodental. What are the labiodentals? Interdental is this, in tongue in between the teeth. And the labiodental is the, what's the sound going to change to? Huh? The V sound, is it not? It's going to go from a voiced interdental over to a voiced labiodental, and both of them are going to still be fricative. So it would go from to Good job. All right. Let's see. Now, this is the one where I said there was an error. Okay. I said there was an error. That theta that there is there should have been the null sign. And if you get this on, if you see something like this on the test, the theta is going to look like that, and the null sign is going to look like that. Okay. So in this particular case, it says, consider the following phonological rule. Nothing, or the empty set, becomes schwa, that's the sound, the very short sound, when, or in the environment where, what? Well, we've got a consonant, we've got a general consonant, we've got the underline, that's where the schwa is going to go, and we've got plus liquid. Okay? What are the liquids? Anybody remember the liquids? Lorraine, no? Lorraine, you know? See how this happens, you sit in front. Huh. What are the liquids? You know the liquids? The L and the R, the two that are right there next to each other. So this is saying that something is happening. The schwa is going to end up between the consonant and the liquid. Okay? So we could read that last part as between a consonant and a liquid. All right? That's all we would have to say there. Now, what is the front part doing though? If I go from nothing to a schwa, which one of the processes was that? Remember we had all those processes? I forgot where I'm at. Am I back with Christina? I think so. Christina. Do you remember we had the 4 processes? We had insertion, deletion, assimilation, and the weird one, metathesis. If I am going from nothing to something, which of those 4 is that? If I go from nothing to something, did I take something out? So it can't be deletion, right? And we don't seem to see anything where it's changing because of the letters around it. So assimilation is out. And metathesis, we're not switching anything around. All we're doing is it's a sign language. Insertion. Yes, exactly. So remember how this works. When we go from nothing to something, we have inserted a sound. If we go from something, let's just say it's something like this. I don't care what it is. If we go from something over to nothing, we would call that deletion because we've taken something that was there and it's no longer there. In the first case, however, we started with nothing and then we stuck in something. So that would be insertion. Now, given that, what would the phonetic output of the rule be for the word please? We're looking for a place where we have a consonant and a liquid, and we're going to stick a schwa in there. The liquids are the L and the R, so L is what we're looking for. What is this going to sound like? Put it in there. Lupe. No. No, it's not going to sound like no. This one's tough, but you have heard people do this. When somebody is exasperated, they say, please. They don't say please, right? Please goes away and they say, please, right? That's what happens in that case because we have a P, that's the consonant, and then we've got a liquid, the L, and we're saying that when those two things happen together, we may be putting a schwa in there, and that's the so it becomes police. Not police, but police. Now, the second question has to do, this one's a little tougher. What happens if we apply the rule to the word pills? Anybody want to guess? Luke, you want to guess with a yes this time? I like it's full of no's. Arpod, what do you think happens? Well, is the P and the L together here? There's already a vowel in there, right? So we aren't going to be putting something in there because it's not between a consonant and a liquid. It's now between either a consonant and a vowel or a vowel and a liquid. So we don't end up with any change. Pills just remains pills. But if we had something like police, we might very well hear people do that. And I can't think of another example. I thought of one yesterday, but there are a few places where we'll hear something like that. So that one's a little weird, but just recognize it says, here's what's happening. This is what would change this sound, but it wouldn't change the other. And then we get over here. Oh, we've seen a lot of this, although we saw kind of an abbreviated one. We saw an abbreviated one of these where we looked at the prefix that means not. We looked at in, right? And we said sometimes that in changes to M. Right? So we've got this. And that means not, right? Because we can use it for inaccurate, we could use it for incomplete, inerrant. That's another good one. Inerrant and inadequate. It just stays as an N. We saw sometimes where it changed over to an M. So I'm going to go like this and say it becomes M. In the environment where, what's in that environment that's making that change to an M? There's a couple of examples where it's in. There's a couple of examples where it's M. When is it an M? Arpod, you remember? When it's in front of a bilabial, right? Impossible, improbable, impotent, impatient. I hope so. It'll blow my whole theory otherwise. Okay, so it's because that when it comes in front of And if you look at some of the examples, it may happen to be an M that's the next thing. It could be the B, or it could be the P. So we don't have to specify anything other than it's a bilabial sound. All three of those are going to work. Now, we take that. There's another case in there. What's the third way that this thing changes? There's N, there's M, and there's reality. I think I'm back to you by now. What's the third one in there? You look at it, you got inaccurate, impossible, incomplete, intolerable, indirect, imbalance, ingrate, inept. What's the third one? Anybody? The NG, right? So sometimes we also see this happen. This and becomes. When does that happen? I think there's two cases in there. After a velar? Or before a velar? Is it not? We've got ingrate, so it's in front of that velar, and we've got incomplete, that's a velar. Why is that happening? Do you have any idea? Well, I'm going to give you the four again. We got four. We've got insertion, deletion, assimilation, and metathesis. Has anything changed order? Nope. Has anything been deleted? Nope. Anything been inserted? Nope. Has anything changed? Yep. We changed the N to the right? Why? What kind of a sound is It's nasal, it's voiced, and it is velar. And what is the K and the G? Stops, voiced and voiceless, and velar. So what we've got happening here is this changes from an M, which is bilabial, if there's a bilabial here. This changes from alveolar to velar, if it's a velar back here. So that's basically what we've got going on. And so if I think this one is answer D, what type of process? The process is assimilation. Exactly. Now, so what determines the phonetic form of the prefix? Well, basically, it is the first letter after the prefix. So in the case of incomplete, it's changed on the third letter, C, or in IPA, the K for incomplete, or the G for ingrate. And similarly up there, when we go to an M, it's because the next symbol is going to be a bilabial. So what determines it? Basically, you could say the first letter after the prefix. Or in this case, you could even go in and say it's the third letter is going to change it. Now, here's the harder part. And this is the part that takes, Alani, look at me. Oh, don't call me. I don't want the harder part. Lucy wants, no, she doesn't want the harder part. Okay. The part C is the hard one. Let's see, where is it? It says, which of the three forms of the prefix is most common? Or is the base? I know you answered this question the last time we had something like this. So we know we've got an anchor here. We got a place to go. But Christina, looking at the book doesn't help. You got to look at your shoes. When you're looking at your shoes, I won't call them. But you got to pull away from the desk. What do you think? Which one is the most common? N, M, or ing? Huh? In, I-N, right? Exactly right. Why do you say that? Did you do that by counting up the words? Okay, good. Excellent. How many velars are there? There are 2, right? So I've got 2. And how many bilabials are there? We've got 3 that we know of that we work with, right? So that's 3. English has about 40 sounds. So if I were to say 2 of the sounds are about 5%, right? 2 divided by 45%. And 3 divided by 40 is about 7.5%. Therefore, 87.5% of the time, at least according to our data, 87.5% of the time, it's going to stay as in. That's the base form because it's the most common. Okay? Doesn't always happen that easily, but in this case, that's what that is. Questions on number 11. Kind of complicated. Requires too much thinking. Oh, this isn't a Friday, so it doesn't require too much thinking for Thursday afternoon. Questions? Okay, so you've got the idea there. You know how to get in touch with me if you do have questions, so please don't be shy. Don't make me be lonely all the time. And that kind of takes us to the next process, or the next topic, and that is morphology. Here's the homework for Tuesday. So Tuesday, it's going to be 3 very short exercises, A, B, and C in chapter 5. Very short, 80 and 81. Should have already read this at least once, maybe twice. So get those textbook exercises. Remember that the first part of the project is due 1 week from today at the beginning of class. Right? You can bring it in on hard copy. Your best bet is to save it as a PDF if you're going to print it any place but the place you generated it. So in any case, here's what you've got 1 week from today. Part 1 of the midterm is going to be the Tuesday after that. Remember, that's not in the syllabus until I changed it recently. And there's already a study guide out there. So you've got the study guide. And we're going to do it in class on Tuesday. It'll be about 15 minutes. We'll do it towards the end of the class so that as soon as you're done, you can leave. Okay? Now, part 2 of the midterm is going to be 2 weeks from today. That's the 10th. And watch your email. I'll have a study guide out there for this exam, probably before the weekend is over. I wrote it up this morning so when I can get it scanned and up on the D2L, you'll have a study guide for the phonology part, which you're able to do anytime. You probably want to practice with it a little bit. And there will be a study guide for the morphology part, which you're probably not ready for yet, but I'll put them all both up there, and then I will put keys out there so you've got, I don't know, maybe a week to work on them before the key shows up. But that'll be before class, so you can ask me questions. Okay? So watch your email for me to tell you that it's out there. All right, so that takes us to some key definitions, the first of which is, what is morphology? We talked about this, I think, the first day when we were still online. What is morphology? Anybody want to tell me? Oh, you want to tell me what morphology is? It is words. What about words? How they're spelled? Not really. That would be more like orthography. It's study of words, true. Not meanings typically, not really meanings. A little bit of meaning flows in there, but it's the study of how words are formed. Okay? How words are formed. That may sound kind of silly because, hey, we got all these words already, but so what do we need to worry about how to form them? Well, when you've got English language learners in your class, morphology can be something that will help their vocabulary explode. Not explode in a bad way, explode in a good way. You don't want them exploding all over badly. The reasons I say that is we're going to be looking at how words are formed. And in morphology, we will look at the things we add at the beginning of words and at the end of words to change the meaning. And as we do that, and as they understand how to take a word and break it up into pieces with those prefixes and the base and everything else, suddenly they get a much bigger vocabulary. So morphology is going to be the study of word formation. It comes from the Greek word morph, which is form. We also use it a lot nowadays to call it change or transformation. When we talk about something morphed into this, we're talking about how it changed from one thing to another. That applies here as well, or how we transform the meaning of a word from one thing to another. And if you think about morph, well, that's the word for form. We also have ology. And ology means the study of something. We talked about phonology. What was that? That was the study of sounds. We could do lexology. That'd be the study of words, kind of more like vocabulary. And so we've got this idea here like biology, geology, astrology, etc. So we take those two things together and it forms the word morphology. And that's probably your first introduction to the idea of morphology. We take two bits of things, we put them together, and now they mean something different. Now, morpheme is another thing that we've got to talk about. And you've seen this before, but I'm going to go in here and say, hey, morpheme is going to be made up of the morph that's up here. That's the same thing. That morph. We're not going to use ology this time, but we are going to use eme. Where have you seen eme before? Yeah. Attached to what? Phoneme, exactly. And there are going to be a number of other things where we attach EME, but phoneme was to look at a unit of sound. And in this particular case, morpheme, it's going to be a unit of the word. Notice here's what the definition of morpheme is. It is the smallest unit of language. We want to keep this simple. We're going to say it is the smallest unit of language that has a meaning of its own. Smallest unit of language that has a meaning of its own. We can stretch it out and be carrying a relatively constant form and a relatively constant meaning. Yeah, but basically, most of the time people say a morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning in a language. And this smallest unit of meaning may be kind of surprising as we start to look at them. But here we've got two morphemes. We've got morph. It isn't a word by itself, but morph has a meaning. And eme down here has a lot of linguistic terms: lexeme, grapheme, phoneme, morpheme, etc. So there's a whole bunch of emes out there. So that's where we're going to start. Morphology is the study of how words are formed, and it's basically how they're formed from different morphemes. Another thing to think about is we could talk about different word types or types of words. This is going to be kind of important because we have content words. Content words are usually words that have a real good, clear, strong meaning in and of themselves. And as we do that, we would typically include nouns, because that represents person, place, or thing. That's got a meaning. Verbs, which are typically some kind of state of being or an action. That's got a pretty strong meaning. Adjectives, which describe nouns, or adverbs, which describe verbs, also have pretty strong meaning. We could say blue sky. So we've got a content word blue, which is the adjective, and sky, which is a noun, and we know what a blue sky is. We could take the word run, which is a verb, and say rapidly, and go run rapidly. We've got two words out there, once again, content words that are full of meanings. Now, They carry most of the semantic load. What that means is they carry most of the meaning in a sentence or in a phrase. And we create new ones all the time. Sometimes we'll take an old word and we'll make it a new meaning. Gay would be an example. Another example would be friend. A friend used to be a thing. Facebook came along and suddenly it became a verb. And if that wasn't bad enough, not only can we friend somebody, we can unfriend them. Well, that's pretty good. Anybody remember the Uncola? These guys are 50 years too young to remember the Uncola. It was 7-Up back in the 60s when other things were weird. Okay. So we go down through here, that's content words. Then we also have a group of words that are function words. They do have meaning, it's true, but it's not the main meaning that we see in sentences. They oftentimes show relationships between words or relationship between parts of sentences. They are typically things that aren't super meaningful, like articles, a, and the. They might be conjunctions, and, but, or, so. They could be prepositions oftentimes. At, to, in, on, about, of, for. They help provide grammatical clarity. There is a difference between a cat and the cat, right? A cat could be any cat we could think of. The cat tends to be one that we're both talking about the same cat. So there's a difference in the meaning. And so that gives us some grammatical clarity. New words are seldom created. Up here, we do them all the time. BYTE for bite on a computer wasn't around before probably the beginning of the 20th century. When we talk about friend and unfriend, that happened in this millennium. So in any case, what we've got here is we've got a bunch of things that are called closed word classes because we don't generate new ones. And we have open word classes up here where we frequently are making new words. Now, the next big question is going to be, how do we look at some group of letters, any group of letters that we might run into, and decide, is this a morpheme or not? For instance, I could go here and say, I don't know, let's come up with, well, is that a morpheme? I can spell it with 2 E's now, so I only spell it with 1. Is PE a morpheme? You see that anywhere? All by itself? Or attached to anything? Nah, it's probably not a morpheme. How about if I took ER? How about ER? Is that a morpheme? Give me an example.
Trainer.
Trainer, very good. That's one way that ER is in there. Farmer, trainer, driver. All kinds of different ER words, right? That's a great example. There's another way we use ER, and it's also a morpheme. How's that? How else do we use ER? We see it all over the place. Ariana, I remembered your name this time, so you got to give me an answer. Colder, hotter, bigger, older, smaller. We've got ER that we attach to certain words to make them more of that, right? We've got the word cold. We also have colder. We have old, but we also have older. So it's a way of changing an adjective around. Now, something to pay attention to, and I'll talk about this again later. ER is not always a morpheme. We take ER and we add it on to another word to change it. But if we took the word father or mother, it won't have an ER on there. Is father is somebody who fathes a father? Or somebody who moths a mother? Nope. Is a fod more of a father than a fod? No. Is a father more of a fod than a father? Still got that wrong. The answer is no. It just so happens that ER is in the middle of this word or at the end of this word. Brother, father, sister, mother, all four of those, but it's just a part of the word. But if we take the word big and we add ER onto it, now we've got a different word, bigger, which means more big, right? Or we put ER on the end of farm and we've got somebody who does that verb. To farm, or the people who farm are farmers. Okay, so what do we look for? Well, we're going to look for it to be a linguistic word called productive. And by productive, we should be able to see this thing being used in lots of different places. Like the ER at the end of an adjective to make it more of that adjective. We see that all over the place. We might even talk about the ER that we stick on the end of a verb to make it the person who does that verb. But here's a few other examples. Think of the word ology. We already saw it once with morphology. You see ology all over the place. You go and do your gen ed, you got to do biology. You might take that a little step further and do physiology. We could go over to the science department and do geology. We could sit in this class and do phonology or morphology. It's all over the place. Radiology, the study of how X-rays work and all that. We've got morph. Well, we could morphology, we could morpheme. We could even stick it in the middle of something and call it metamorphosis, like a butterfly changing from a caterpillar. Phoneme, lexeme, grapheme. I've already talked about lexeme is a word, phoneme is a sound, grapheme is a letter that you can write. And then look at something here as simple as ED. Take that ED and you stick it on the end of a word, suddenly you've got a different word. Don't you? Right? If I walk, that's a little bit different than walked. If I say I walk, that doesn't mean the same thing as I walked, right? I walk maybe all the time, but I walked at some point in the past. So ED is an extremely common one that we attach to a verb to show that something happened in the past. Now, walk, talk, look, indicated, and completed. Those would all be examples. Sometimes you're only going to add a D for spelling, sometimes it's an ED. That's kind of secondary, it doesn't really matter. What we're looking for is word parts that happen a lot. We can find them. Now, here's one that I want you to try to grasp, and then I want you to go back and read this a couple of times to really get it. But if we think about a word like dog, repeat, big, grew, doesn't matter, any word you want, we would typically, if that's just the word itself, we could call that the core word or the root. The root. And we take affixes. Well, you're familiar with affixes because all through school, people have been telling you about prefixes and suffixes, right? What's a prefix? Well, it's some meaning that goes at the beginning of a word. And what's a suffix? It fits at the end and it changes the meaning. So this word affix is just kind of a general idea. It's both. In fact, other languages have things that are circumfixes, so you got something on the front and the back, some things in the middle. It's kind of complicated, but for our purposes, we're going to have two. We got prefixes and suffixes. They attach to a base. Okay, they attach to a base. This is the first place where it gets a little creepy. And that base could be a root, but it might be more than a root. It might be a root plus something else. Okay, so a root is going to be the basic core word. Let's take an example. Here's an affix. Well, here is a one of the root words and we put on the front, what does do? It makes it not. It makes it not. How about if I put S on the end of dog? Does dog have the same meaning as dogs? No, there's a slight difference. One is one dog and another one is more than one. So that S ends up being a morpheme or an affix that we attach to the core root dog. We could take repeat and add ED. So we're talking about something we did in the past, and we could take big and we could add EST to mean it is the biggest. In each case, we have added here something to the root, which happens to also be the base. But down here, when we talk about the base, we look at it, the word to which an affix attaches. Ungroup would be the base for the word ungrouped, right? I grouped them yesterday. Today I ungrouped them. Well, I have taken ED and I didn't add it to group. I added it to ungroup. I could take repeated and add that on to repeat and lead. Repeatedly. Now suddenly we've got a word that's got 3 morphemes in it. Right? Here's another one with 3 morphemes in it. Ungroup 2. Now we could maybe argue about repeat because this RE here looks like re-examine, re-talk, restate, all those other ones. I'm not quite sure about that one, so I'm going to leave repeat as the word. And we may pull re off of there and reuse it someplace else. Main reason is I can't think of a good way to say peep. Hey, I peep. So a root is the core word. Affix is attached to a base, and that base may be a root. If this is the first affix going on there, it would probably be the root. If there's more than one affix on there, suddenly it's being attached to the base, which is bigger than the root. Go over it. It's not going to be super important to you, but I would like you to kind of understand it. Now, I want to, just based on what you've read, what we've talked about, what little bit we've talked about, let's go through an exercise here. How many morphemes are there in the word car? We're going to start at the front. That's 3 sounds. How many morphemes? Pieces of meaning. 1, right? I mean, there's car. We can't break it down any further. We don't have R's and cars. We got car, right? Now, Sebastian, are you ready? How many morphemes in cars? Don't. Love it? Good for non-Spanish speakers. Diana, sorry to wake you up, buddy. What? How many morphemes in the word beautiful? Huh? I agree with you. What are they? You? Full's 1. What's the other one? Yes, you do. Don't worry about the spelling. Beauty. Right? It's beauty, right? Something that is full of beauty. Beauty would be a single word all by itself, a single morpheme. Beautiful is full of beauty. Basically, that's 2 morphemes. Am I right? You want to redeem yourself? Very good, but okay. That leaves it with Jen. Jen, how many are there in beautifully?
So I guess there's
Oh, you got to stay with Gusto.
3.
3. Yeah, exactly 3. What are they? Beauty. That's our root word. In this case, it's beauty is the root word and it's the base for beautiful. But over here, Beauty is still the root, but beautiful is the base that we add ly onto. Right? Okay, great. So let's make it harder. Do. Oh, sorry. It's pretty easy. Very good. Undo.
Two.
Two. Very good. Redo. Don't jump on it too quick. Redo. Very good. All right, redo. Okay. Isabel. Redoable. Okay. Yes. What are they?
Redo.
Great. What is the base for redoable?
Base is redo.
Oh, very good. And what is the root for redoable?
Two.
All right. So you guys together. Good. Act. Ariana, I got your name right twice.
One.
Act. Exactly. Pretty hard to work that into more than one, right? And this is another good place where you look at a group of letters. It's not always a morpheme because we have the word fact, which has act in it, but it has nothing to do with the word act. It just happens to be the spelling. But how about if I go, oh, this is good. I'm sorry. I had to give the hard one to somebody. Activated. Activated. Why didn't you say it? You didn't want it? That's fine. But it's still 4, right? Activated. Don't think it's active and then aided as 2 or active and 8. Act starts the thing. That's the root. Active becomes the base for activate, and activate becomes the base for activated. Hunt. Christina. Okay. Really confident there. Hunters. She saved the hard one for you. Hunt. What are they? The person who hunts is the hunter, and if there's more than one, it's hunters, right? So it's got 3. Very good. All right. Calculate. Oh, Artpod. You look like a math guy. I'm not. Calculate. How would you break that? How would you deal with this one? This one we can argue about it all day. Okay, I can live with more. I could say calculate, it's just a word all by itself, nothing else there. I could also argue what? Can you think of something else I could argue? I'm not even sure what the real answer is to this. I just like to argue about it. Calcul, as in calculate, and calculate. But if I were a betting person, I would have called it just what you did. It's more. How about if I say calculator? That's 2. I hope that's not the next one on the list. Or you'll have done a 2 for. Let's see. Calculation. How many? R5, go ahead. How many? The 2? Calculate and shun. Calculation. Great. All right. Small. Selma, you got the easy one. 1. All right. Here we go. Small s. Galley. 2. Now we're into the tough stuff. Luckily, we've got we've got Cynthia waiting for us when the hard ones come along. How many morphemes in 0? None. Okay. Man, how many? I'm going to stay with you because you're the star. Men, how many? Oh, have you read this book already? 2. That seems rather strange. How can it be two? Well, we have man, that's singular, and men would kind of be a lot like man with an S. Right? I could show you woman. I think that's probably the next one. No, it's not child. How many? One. Children? Two. Even though it's got a goofy kind of a pluralization, it's still two. It's child multiple. Go is one. Goes. Rain. Oh, what are they? Yeah, what does that ES mean? You're absolutely huh? No, it doesn't mean plural, but it does mean first we have to change that verb when we're talking about he, she, or it, right? I go, you go, but he, she, or it goes. Even that thing is a morpheme. And then eat, eaten. Anybody? Jump on it. Two, because it's a little bit different than eat by itself, right? So all of those are kind of marked off a little differently. We've got two is man plus plural, or child plus plural. Down here it's go, or the third person singular in the present tense of a verb. Or down here we've got eat plus the past participle, which you may or may not be real familiar with. Let's do something real quick. Morphemes, these are general ideas. Morphemes are not the same as syllables. Cattle, 2 syllables, 1 morpheme. Cows is 1 syllable, 2 morphemes. So they don't match up. Okay? They do not match. Identical spellings don't mean identical meaning. I've got hunter and add an S, so I now have multiple hunters, right? Multiple people doing the hunt. I've got hunt, which is the third person singular, but the sound of hunters here and hunters there, from anybody who is not reading it, would say they sound exactly the same, but they're very different. This one is multiple hunters, and this is something that belongs to a hunter. There are regular and irregular morphemes. We've seen them when we talked about men and women and children, right? Most of the time we can add some kind of an S to it, but it doesn't always work that way. So there are regular and irregular morphemes for plural, like axe and axes is plural, but ox and oxen is ox plus plural, just like men and women and children. Or we could take something like walk and make it past tense with an ED. Or we could take something like eat and it becomes past tense in a completely irregular form. And then finally, morphemes are not necessarily the same as the history or the word of its parts. A hamburger is different than a hamburger. Am I right? Everybody eats hamburgers, but not everybody, nobody eats hamburgers. What's a hamburger? Somebody who lives in Hamburg. Where's Hamburg? See, you guys know everything. All right. So the same thing happens with a Frankfurter, right? A person who lives in Frankfurt is a Frankfurter, isn't he? So it's a hot dog. It's just magical. This whole language thing is just magic. Okay. This should be the same as the one you've already seen. I'll leave it there until you're gone. You guys remember where I live. You guys remember where my phone lives, or at least the number to it. And you should be talking to me if you got problems. Okay? Linguistic problem. We'll be a little more specific. Oh, it could be. It could be either one. I really wouldn't charge anybody else. I don't know whether it's finger or finger. I don't know, but it could be either one from my point of view. Yeah, same thing happens oftentimes. You may hit the there are cases where it's really different, like sit and see. In other cases, it's real hard to differentiate. Like
one, this one. Receipt. That's how I did it.
Receipt. Yes, I think you can get away with that. I would have thought maybe more receipt or receipt. Receipt. Yeah, that's cool.
Okay. And then I can, would this be right?
Great, yes, that'd be fine. If you wanted to use the diphthong, it kind of stretches that A sound out a little bit. You guys have a good weekend. It's only Thursday, but hey, how many people have Friday classes? Nobody. Finger, yes. It could be the capital I or the lowercase I. It's really hard to know. Finger or finger. So I would live with both of them. You get some? That would be finger. I've got to get that G. Well, the G is the one that's really important. And some people would leave out. Because you got to have that good sound in there. Yep. You have to have